Our tupuna, hape, arrived here on the back of a stingray, kaiwhare, around the time that the waka were leaving Hawaii on their great migration to find Aotearoa, or to come to Aotearoa, following kupe. And our story really starts there. It starts with hape, because if it wasn't for him and his journey coming to Aotearoa, we wouldn't be here. And when we look at the significance of Ihumātao, when we look right back into our history and why it's so important now to continue to fight for this whenua, look after this whenua, grow plants on this whenua, we actually have to look right back to hape and to his arrival. So hape was a tohunga that lived in Hawaii and came to Aotearoa on a stingray because he had clubbed feet and he was told that he wasn't of able body to travel on the waka. When he arrived in Aotearoa, he came through Ihumātao, or through the Manukau Harbour, up through this whenua here in Ihumātao, and this maunga just behind us is te puke tāpapatanga a hape. It's the flat hill where hape laid down to have a rest. And this hill is also known as Puke Iti. It's the smallest volcanic cone in the Auckland Isthmus, but it is the biggest volcano in the history of our whānau. This area, Ihumātao, is derived from the name Te Ihu or Mataoho. And Mataoho was a deity, or still is. Mataoho is a deity that lives underneath Tāmaki Makaurau, and he's responsible for igniting all of the volcanoes. And Te Ihu, the nose, is this area here. We have a maunga that has since been quarried called maunga take, and some people say it was pointy like a nose, and hence why this area was given the name the nose. But Mataoho is significant across the stories of Tāmaki Makaurau. Puketutu Island, which was also known as Te Motu Aotearoa, was originally named Te Kauai o Mataoho, the jaw of Mataoho. Te Pane o Mataoho, which is today also known as Mangere Mountain, is the head of Mataoho. There are volcanic craters that go across Tāmaki ki te tonga, which are ngā tapuai o Mataoho, the footprints of Mataoho. Mount Eden is Te Pukai o Mataoho. So Mataoho is a significant deity to us and is how we got our name. Our tupuna lived here in Ihumātao. They lived peacefully here, they gardened here. All across Aotearoa Stonefields, or what is now known as Aotearoa Stonefields, is where the Amara Kai was, because this land is incredibly fertile, because it's volcanic land. They would use the volcanic rock to make tāpapa, and those tāpapa would hold the heat of the sun from the day and keep the soil warm at night time so that those plants could grow. Over where Maunga Take once was, on the other side of Maunga Take was the original pā site, Te Tiki Pā. And so all of those stories and all of that history is 800 plus years old. And that's where we start. And then we come through generations. So when we pass the 1863 land confiscations, we pass the settlement of Pākehā farmers here. We look to the establishment or the re-establishment of the papakainga, and we move to our grandparents. And our grandparents only 2 generations ago were able to grow kai here. Not necessarily here, but here in this wider peninsula of Ihumātao. And I think people get really stuck on this piece of land being Ihumātao. Ihumātao is this entire peninsula. The airport sits in Ihumātao. You know, these are things that we need to be really clear and know and understand. Before our grandparents' time, our maunga had been quarried. Maunga take, Otuataua, Waitomokia, they were all quarried to make Auckland's roads, to make the Auckland International Airport runway. When we look at our moana, Te Manukunuku o Hoturua, which talks about the anxiousness of the captain of the Tainui Waka Hoturua, that moana has been polluted because of the wastewater treatment plant. Our awa, Te Wai o Ruarangi being another one of our tupuna, that awa has been polluted because of the wastewater treatment plant. The encroachment of all the factories in Aotearoa puts pollution into the air, puts pollution into the waterways, brings trucks along. The oil from the trucks then gets washed into the water, further polluting the water. In 2012, there was a dye spill in one of the nearby factories, 1,000 litres of purple dye concentrate that turned out awa bright purple. Now, when the wastewater treatment plant was brought here, it took 20 years for our whānau in the Papakanga to be connected to that wastewater treatment plant. That wastewater treatment plant took out all of the kai source that was in the moana, took out all of the kai source that was in the awa. You could get freshwater crayfish in that awa. You could get flounder. You could get every kind of kai moana in that harbour. And so this is how we grew up, knowing, hearing these stories of our tupuna, hearing these stories from our grandparents, because at their age, they were able to still gather that kai moana. They were able to still grow that kai. My grandmother would go down and get freshwater crayfish for her lunch, pick watercress off the side of the awa. The power, though, would stop at the bridge and it would start again at the first Pākehā farmer's house. So this contested land wasn't just about stopping housing development. It was about stopping any kind of development that was further desecrating the whenua of Ihumātao. It was about reinstating what was once here and allowing our tamariki mokopuna, your tamariki mokopuna, to be able to enjoy it in years to come. It was about, and continues to be about, honouring those tupuna that came before us and the mahi that they did. You know, we talk about climate resilience, we talk about rongoa, we talk about all of these kind of words that they have today. They just lived that. They lived resilience, they lived climate resilience, they lived sustainability. Our tupuna lived all of those things. Their science and their mātauranga was intrinsic in who they were. Our grandparents raised us in a ao Pākehā world so that we were educated, we went to university, we understood how the Western system worked, and they kept us grounded in a ao Māori world, where we had to go to the marae, to every marae meeting once a month, we were at all the tangihanga, where we were taught tikanga and kawa. And so we were privileged to be able to walk in both worlds and bring those things together. And we didn't know when we needed to bring those things together, but it just so happened to be now. So when we talk about, think about, reflect on this campaign and how this campaign started, it started with Hape. Hape was told he couldn't do something. He wasn't able. You know, he was resilient. He did it anyway. He got here. And so while it may have looked like throughout those 8 years that we failed in the Environment Court, or we failed in the Māori Land Court, or we failed in the Waitangi Tribunal, or we failed when we went to Parliament, or we failed at this protest or that protest. Actually, none of those were failures. They were just reflections of how people treated Hape. And he still came to Aotearoa, planted his kauri seedlings, set out his whenua, and then came the rest of us. And so when we look at all of these perceived failures, we actually see success, because you have to go through all of those failures to say you've tried it all, you've done it all, and now we're just going to live the life that we had always intended, that our tupuna had intended for us. So it's really important that while we look at the social justice side of things, that all of that social justice is derived from the cultural richness of our history. And if we don't pair them together, if we don't understand that richness of whakapapa, that richness of those practices that our tupuna once had, that richness of that kōrero tukuiho that gets passed down from this generation to the next generation, then we don't know how to stand. We don't know how to do what it is we do, because all of our answers are in our history. All of our answers are in mātauranga Māori, are in Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous practice. And when we understand that, we know how to move forward. We know when's the right time. We know when it's time to transition and get to this point. So it's really important that we acknowledge Hape, that we acknowledge our tupua mataho, that we acknowledge our tupua te tūrehu maki, who our wharenui is named after. All of these names, all of these tūtohu whenua, all of these landmarks, all of these stories, these pūrākau are why. They're the why. So that we can hand that on to our tamariki and our mokopuna, your tamariki and your mokopuna, so that for the next 7 generations, they know that they're well, that they're oranga as well. And hopefully they pick up that same mātauranga and carry that on for the 7 generations after them, and after them, and after them. That's what's significant about Ihumātao. So there were a number of ways that we found out about what was happening here on the whenua in terms of the Special Housing Areas Act and the designation of this whenua being SHA 62. One way was that people had heard some rumours about what was going on. Another way was one of our uncles had seen some pegs, survey pegs going into the ground. The thing with that Special Housing Areas Act law was that there was no requirement to notify. So there was no requirement to tell the local community, the local hapu, which meant that we didn't get a lot of the information that really we should have got as neighbours, regardless of whether we're Māori, Pākehā, kia hara, neighbours should have been informed. So when we did find out, I'd actually been having a rant on Facebook, as you do, about Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, or Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and this whole whakaaro around settlement and how it actually splits Māori and splits whānau, how it makes you have to draw a boundary around what's yours and what's someone else's. It changes relationships between people. And I was very privileged that I was raised with my grandparents. So I was raised in a time that was bliss, where my grandparents and the grandparents of those of our cousins who form the soul movement were just all very humble, simple living people who all got along, who loved their whānau and who always put their marae and their whānau first. So when we found out about what was happening, as you do, you kind of have a bit of a kōrero on Facebook first and foremost to say, these things are happening, it's changing, everything's changing. And I saw a few cousins jump on and make comment and have a kōrero, and so I said, how about you fellas come over to my house for dinner? And so they came for dinner one night, we had a kōrero, and we made each other one promise. And the promise was we would try every single thing possible to stop the development and return the whenua. We'd already spoken to our kaumātua and kuia about it. We'd spoken to our aunties and uncles, our whānau, and that was the promise we made. We never promised to win. We never promised to deliver a social enterprise or a mara or anything else. All we just said was we will try every single thing possible, so that at least we could look our tamariki in the eye and said, well, we tried every single thing possible. And the beauty about that is that there are infinite possibilities. And so long as you have the willingness to carry on, we carry on. But 6 of us got together that night, had a kai, and decided that this is what we were going to do. I don't think we anticipated what we were getting ourselves into, to be honest, but that naivety was quite beautiful because it meant that we had no idea what we were getting into and we did it anyway. And look, we've had so many babies born since then. I've had a kōrero, Pania's had one, she's got another one on the way, our cousin Waimari has had 3, our cousin Bobby Joe's had 4. Like all these different babies born. We've had loved ones lost, we've lost kuia, kaumātua, those who were the backbone of us, but we keep going because it's important.
It's all a little bit of a blur now. I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018, but after we cleaned up the cow shed and made it a comfortable space, we then thought, okay, where are some other spaces that we can occupy to have shelter, adequate shelter for our kaitaki that we're staying on the whenua, and also have spaces that we want to live in. And so this whare here used to be was one of the Wallace residents, and over the years different people came to live in this property, rent it from the family. And so the renters had been living here for a really long time, and they had received their eviction notice from Fletcher Building Limited, and so they left. And when the house became vacant, me and my dad decided to move in. And some of the whānau were again a little bit reluctant, really hesitant, because it was another space we were taking over and that we had to maintain, but also the element of risk that came with occupying the Wallace house here. But it was probably one of our more strategic moves, because then we were able to downscale our camp that we had on the side of the road here that was made out of largely marquees and tents, and then move into the solid brick building here. And it's funny when I think about the different spaces that I lived in over the years, because I've been here, I think this is my 7th year occupying or reclaiming the whenua. And when I started, I lived in my car, moved into a tent, upgraded to a caravan, and then I eventually moved into this house here. And it was a beautiful home and a campaign building for us to operate from. So we had meetings up there, lots of celebrations, lots of arguments, lots of planning, and when my dad passed away in 2019, I was living here at the time with a number of other kaitiaki and whānau, and we decided to bring him here for his first night because he was so involved and involved in the campaign, and also was passionate about this whenua. And so my siblings agreed, and we had his first night here, and then the following day we carried him from this house down to the marae. And it was a huge decision for our whānau to make. You know, this whare has a history that's largely, about the Fletcher, or about the Wallace family. And so having Dad here was another move for us to become more comfortable with the space, but also connected us with it. And so for my siblings who weren't necessarily as involved in what we were doing, after that became more involved because this was the place where my dad spent his first day during his tangihanga. And so it was a significant place and holds a lot of memories. Again, this was one of the whare that whānau have talked about demolishing, but one of the ones that I'm really fighting to protect, again from a sustainability and upcycling perspective and a Kaitiakitanga perspective, but also because it's a solid whare and it's been here for a long time. And part of our kōrero too is about in our kōrero we honour the Māori history, but also the settler history as well, and the whanonga that have been made over the years, good and bad. And so, very special whare. At the moment, it's out of bounds because it's become a little bit more derelict, but our aspirations for this whare is for it to become a Kaitiaki's whare, so that maybe one of our whānau will eventually live in there in the future, and we'll be able to maintain our mara, our ngāhere here, and also assist with the ongoing guided tours and workshops and wānanga that we'll be having on the whenua. So I think I painted this back in 2017, 2018. Again, the dates are a bit blurry. But I'm still amazed that it's still here. And over here in this area here, we had a kaiwhare mara, which was the first mara that we had planted into the whenua, into the soil. Prior to that, we had been planting in planter boxes just around the whenua. And so, again, that was another step for us to become more comfortable with the whenua and start, reclaiming this space. And one of the kōrero within our mahinga kai circles is that to really connect with the whenua, you need to plant on the whenua and eat from the whenua. And so that was one of our kaupapa here. And I was really proud too that my dad was involved in that. We planted it during a rākau nui marama, and had lots of the whānau and hapori get involved. And it was a really exciting project. So we've obviously moved on to that and are now growing more kai and more space on our whenua.
well, the barn looked way different to what it looks like now. And actually we just had a visitor come in this morning going, where's all the hay bales? So it's quite interesting to see other people's reactions when they haven't been here for a little while or seen the transition or been part of the transition. But this barn was an old cow barn, and it had a gravel floor. It was dark. The walls had holes all in them. There weren't windows and things. Well, in the very beginning there weren't. The roof was pretty dodgy. But it was a sheltered space, and it was a big space, and it was a space that we were able to use to have hui in. So our hui used to take place in another building off-site, and we would meet there, the soul group would meet there sort of every Tuesday evening. And then this space was used, and there were variations of couches. They were like couches that were covered in fake grass, turf, covered in turf. There were
donated from a company that went into liquidation. It was a no-brainer. Like, no one wants to purchase like turf furniture. It was really prickly.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, they were actually really good, and they I shot a portrait of someone on them, and they were really great for photography. So it was really cool. But I remember actually, I've got some photos of 2018, I think, of us in the barn, and you were shoveling metal at the door. And Waimarie, there's another one of Waimarie standing in the doorway of that old barn, this old barn. And then gradually it changed. It kind of has been changing for the last few years though. Like even before the reclamation, when we were meeting in here, there were different people who came in and started installing windows just to let some light in. And so then we'd have windows, and then we'd have still the same door, but there'd just be a little bit more light. And then there was like a table and like a lectern-y thing down this end for meetings.
So much bigger back then.
It did.
The floor was
lower. Yeah. I don't know, it just, the space, it's gone through different lifetimes, and it's gone through different phases as we've gone through different phases. Yeah. And so as the campaign has changed, as the mahi has changed, as the dreams and aspirations for the whenua have evolved, so too has this building. So it's actually not until you pointed out that I realised the building probably tells the story. This particular building tells the story of the campaign and the kaupapa over its lifetime. Yeah. It's 8 years now since we started.
I think we first moved into this building at the end. We moved onto the whenua on the 4th of November 2016 in commemoration, the day before the commemoration day for Parihaka. And that was important for us because, we take a lot of our learnings from Parihaka, and we're inspired by, that particular movement. And I think it took us a really long time to get comfortable on the whenua and then moving into this space. So it was something like 8 months after we had retained the whenua that we moved into this space. A lot of people were reluctant because it was another thing that we had to maintain. At that time we were struggling to keep up the tents and the caravans and the little village that we had started back in 2016, and so taking over new space, but also because we were on the side of the road, there was an element of safety and limited risk, whereas when we moved into the barn, we were on Fletcher's land, and that was a whole nother ballpark for us. And so we were comfortable enough to move in, and it was an old derelict cow shed, had cow dung up to our knees in here, and we hucked it out and replaced it with some Gap 7 that we got donated by the weddings family just down the road here, and then we met in this whare nearly every Tuesday evening for the soul meetings, and I think that it's quite mind-blowing that we sat in this building through all those seasons in the dark sometimes, having meetings till late at night, and the nannies turning up to those meetings as well. It's evolved so much, but it holds so many memories, this whare. We first wanted to take it over because it was a sheltered space, and it was quite sturdy, and as more people became aware of what we were doing, more people wanted to come and visit, and so we thought, let's turn this into a whare wānanga, into a meeting space. And so this whare has hosted thousands of groups from all around the world. We've had members from the Black Panthers movement, and Idle No More campaign, and with Free West Papua have come to visit, and so it's really special when things were de-escalating through the campaign as we were moving closer to a positive resolution. Whānau and friends were saying, why would you want to keep this colonial building? It's just another reminder of the desecration that the settler families did to this whenua. But one part of our kaupapa too was about how do we, upcycle and be more sustainable, and so we decided that we'd keep this whare, although we've pulled down a number of derelict cow sheds or sheds around here in barns. We decided to keep this one, and it does its job. It hosts us well. It's hosted many birthdays and reunions, and overflows from tangi and meetings and presentations, and we still have a lot of whānau and groups wanting to hire the space, just come and hang out, which is it's really awesome, and it's a space that can help people connect back to the whenua, and that's probably what I love most about it.
This coming Matariki, we launched Te Ihumātao educational tours. So, our whānau have collectively been giving tours of the whenua for generations. And even before us, I think Pania and I have probably been the face of many tours over the last few years. But even before us, Auntie Kōwhai was doing tours almost on her own for years. And then before her, her dad was the one sharing information about the awa and the moana. And so there have been varying whānau members who have just naturally done this mahi, because that's what you do as kaitiaki, and that's how we educate our community and our own whānau, and how we keep all these stories alive. And so Te Ihumātao tours is the transition to formalising it as a social enterprise that is a pakahi under the mana of Te Ahiwaru Trust. And we've got two guides, a business manager or operations manager, and we've got some other kaimahi that work on the team that kind of move between this side and the Mara, and it's really exciting to see it all come to fruition. We've been doing some mahi with the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum and developing resources that will be for our whānau, but also for our local schools, for schools that are not local who want to come along and learn more about both the history and the culture and the social justice side of things. So there's two parts to what happens here in Ihumātao, and there's two key focuses for Te Ihumātao tours as well. So it's quite exciting. We've got lots of different kinds of people coming to the launch. We've got some of the local stakeholders that we work with. We've got some of representatives from the local schools. We've got our own whānau. We've got people from council and local board and all of those kinds of people who are also quite excited to see this development. And I think people often ask, what's your hope for the future of the whenua? But actually we're just living it. Like we're living the future of the whenua, and slowly but surely our whānau, who we always knew were going to be capable to do all of this stuff, are doing it. And, you know, it's been really transformative to have Te Ahiwaru Trust, I guess, in a new phase of its existence as well for our hapu, Te Ahiwaru, and seeing all the opportunities that have come from that. And a lot of that has been, supporting what's happening here on the whenua. The research that's happening here on the whenua, the climate resilience and the rongoa stuff, the mara, you know, we're looking at our marae native plant nursery needs to expand. And so why not have that expansion happen here on the whenua? That native plant nursery that's operated under Makaurau Marae has served and serviced Auckland Transport, Auckland Airport, Auckland Council, you know, because it's an eco-sourced native plant nursery. And so it needs to expand, and it's exactly what this whenua is for. You know, it's always been part of our history in terms of its relationship to the mara, to the whenua, to growing, to, you know, not just growing kai or growing trees, but growing our minds, you know, growing our hearts and aroha, growing our awareness. So there are very exciting times coming up this Matariki, and what a better time than Matariki. You know, we farewell the past, we look to the future, and it's time. Yeah.
I guess it's also a really important week for Te Ahiwaru as well, because this year marks 160 years since our whānau were ejected from our whenua through the 1863 proclamation that was issued by Sir Governor Grey. And so that's another significant reason why we've chosen to launch this Matariki. It's also the 4th year since the escalation or the second ejection happened here in Ihumātao. And it's also the time where we've, as a whānau, decided that we will whakawātea the whenua as well. So to relieve all those kaitiaki who have been living on the whenua for the past 4-6 years, and to say, you know, our mahi is done, and we as a whānau and as a marae and as a hapu are satisfied with the outcome and the resolution, and it's now time to go home and reset and you know, be with loved ones. And so that's another significant reason. But we've always said too in this kaupapa that our whenua holds rich history. You know, it's a rare cultural heritage landscape, and you know, the narratives of the beginnings of our nation's history lay across this landscape, and largely it's intangible, the intangible values that we speak to when we have groups come to visit. And that is why we've always said that the Fletcher development was inappropriate for this whenua, and that it needed to be preserved and protected so that we can speak to these stories, because there's this saying, ki te kore he whenua, kore he tangata, you know, without the land there are no people, and without the land too, how can we continue to tell those stories, and how can we continue to connect with the land? And so another thing too is that through a series of whānau engagement wānanga over the last 6 years, we've identified a number of aspirations that our whānau have for this whenua. A lot of those aspirations are centred on reclaiming the whenua for what it was once used for, to grow kai, to be climate resilient, to have a space where our whānau can seek rongoa, you know, a healing space, and you know, it's a tūranga waiwai, it's a wahi tapu, a wahi tupuna, and things like that. And so through Aotearoa o tours, we're able to speak to those, and we're able to walk it as well. And what's also exciting is that any of the any profits or income derived from that whānau enterprise goes back into the sustainability projects that we as a whānau are working on this whenua. So that's the restoration of our puna, growing our native without ngākere that were
felled when the settler families acquired the land. And so our whānau have been working really hard over the last 4 years to plant native rako and to restore the puna and to connect back to it and to reclaim our stories and our histories and our practices pertaining to mahinga kai, and most importantly our hononga to the whenua. So we're really excited about that. We're doing some really exciting things. We're growing seedlings, doing hikoi, growing trees,
harvesting seeds from a lot of the native trees,
and restoring the whenua as well. The wahi tapu that have been desecrated through farming and that were damaged and at the time of the ejection. So we're really excited about what the future holds, but also about what we're doing now.
So I guess actually before the police even got here, they were parked, they were all down the road. So some of them were up here in cars, there were more waiting just down the end of Ihumātao Road. There was about 120 police officers, so it was the 23rd of July, it was early in the morning. And they had come in full force, like they wasn't just one cop car or, And when they came in, so firstly they came in with cars and they drove down to the end of this road because that's where they were going to issue an eviction notice. And so they went down to Kaitiaki village to the shed and were trying to evict whoever was around at the time. And then of course as the day's events unfolded, different things were happening here on the road. Different things were happening with other trucks trying to get in for fletchers to put fences up and those sorts of things. On that night, or on that evening actually, it was just as the sun was setting, more and more of our whānau had come up from the papakainga, and the police were in army formation. So they were shoulder to shoulder, they were 3 deep, and they were just here on this road. And they were on that side of the road facing out to stop us from getting in, and we were all on this side of the road. And initially there was just a lot of mamai, it's a lot of pain from our whānau, a lot of tears, a lot of heartache, just watching how it was unfolding and watching the excessiveness of the police. And really not understanding, well, it's not that we didn't understand why there were so many of them, it was that we were sitting here going, really? Today, in 2019, this is how you still treat Māori communities? You still treat us like we're the criminals, like we're doing things wrong, like we're going to be violent, like you're preparing for us to do something, They really instigated an unsafe situation, not us. We were here planting and doing gardens and living on our whenua with our whānau. And so you can see just down here, the first kind of burn mark in the road. That's about where the first ahi was lit, or the first part of that ahi was lit. And the interesting thing was, police are supposed to be strategic, but they were not very strategic when they blocked themselves on the inside of this road. And so whānau gathered and they'd made this front line here. And as more and more whānau came, the police suddenly realized that actually they can't come out. And so they were having to figure out their own strategy, and we had access to a road and we were able to get in and out and have cars and all that kind of stuff. So so this is the first area where we came up against the police. And that evening, I vividly remember that evening, and I think I'll always remember that evening, because as I was standing here, all of our whānau were here, our nieces were singing the most beautiful waiata. There was kohu, there was fog all across the whenua. For us, in the original settlement, and even before that, Tāmaki Makaurau, but particularly Ihumātao, this area was known as a place that had low fog, that had kohu. Because the Pasipairahi and the Tūrehu lived here. And so that kohu was what kept them safe. And so seeing the kohu along the whenua and then seeing the sunset really was a sign to us that our tupuna were here. It was quite emotional, and not so much emotional because of the police, but emotional because we knew that our tupuna were here with us. And that was probably the most powerful tohu we could have ever received. So we were out on the road, still colonised in our thinking, because we were standing on the road. And it was our tamariki who really wanted to plant their flags on our maunga, te puke tāpapatanga ahape. And so our tamariki jumped the rock wall and started running across the field. And the police didn't know what to do, and they were like running out sideways, and the kids were, all their rugby league sidestep moves. And a few of the kids made it to the maunga and planted their flags on top. And when everybody turned around, there were like 3 tents pitched. And so that's how the reclamation started. All of this area was that front line. And as the days went on, so over the next few days, more and more people arrived. And by that weekend, there were 10,000 people here on the whenua. These roads were blocked. And 4 years later, these roads are still blocked. We call them traffic slowing measures. Some days they're completely blocked for safety. So when we have school groups here and tamariki here, and other days there's just a cone so people can still access. We had planned before the reclamation who was responsible for what areas, who was going to look after the taumata, who was going to look after the kai, who was going to look after us spiritually, who was going to be responsible for comms and political strategy, and who was going to be the mangai, the spokesperson, and who was going to front the media and all of that kind of stuff. And so the taumata was set up to welcome manuhiri that were coming through, because we had so many different groups of people come through, of multiple ethnicities, of multiple ages, or, intergenerational, from all over the country, international, people coming. And so our taumata was there to welcome all those manuhiri who arrived, to thank them for coming to support. We had our aunties and uncles running a kitchen that was set up with, some kind of makeshift marquees on one side. And in that kitchen, they were cooking 3 meals a day, like full meals, and people were just donating kai. And so those meals were, there was steak, there was boil up, there was soups, there was hangi, there was the most incredible kai. But that's what our whānau does. Our whānau are manaki people. We plant food, we cook food, we feed the people. And so that was all set up in this area here, on the roadside. And then we had, we started off a communications hub and just a gazebo. Because it was the middle of winter, a gazebo wasn't going to last very long. And so we ended up getting in portacoms, and that's because people were donating money, people were donating food and firewood and all of that kind of stuff. And so with the donated money that was coming in, we were able to set up portacoms. And in those portacoms was where we ran the communications hub, where we ran the political strategy, kōrero that was happening in there. So some of us missed out on seeing the stand walkers and the, people were, oh, there was this thing that happened. And we were like, we were doing this other way, making sure everybody was safe. And so there were different people at different ends of the road. And then at the front line who were responsible for ensuring that those spaces, everybody knew that when they were coming in, that it was peaceful, it was passive. We're being positive in here. Our Māori wardens came to support, and they set up another portacom at the front, and had this big loudspeaker that had music. And so they would play. There are some songs that even now are a bit triggering when I hear them. I'm like, no, turn it off. Because it just brings me back to that time on the whenua. And then just sometimes, you have the same song playing over and over again. It's like, stop it. But they were just here. So this was kind of like the waharua, the tongokanga of the whenua. And then, of course, people were camping or had their tents all in this part of the whenua here. So on that first day, so then what happened, from the first day to the end of the week and then to the next week, things just continued to evolve and change. But that very first day, it was really just our whānau from the Papakainga standing here. And it was it was heavy, it was pouty, but it was also really powerful, because I think having that tohu of that sun setting behind the maunga, of that kohu here, and of my beautiful nieces, you know, just singing those waiata, reminded us of our strength and our resilience, reminded us who we are and who we come from, and reminded us why we were here in the first place. And so the police didn't have a chance, really. They were working against measures that were far beyond them. Yeah, so the ahi kind of, the marks in the road are really great at showing the stages of the ahi. And so you can kind of see the burn marks. But this ahi here, how many days, Pania? 23rd of July 2019 to today. However, 4 years, 24/7 that fire's been burning. And you know, it's on the day that we started the fire, multiple people were helping to keep it alight. And over the last, year or so, the likes of Solomon, the likes of Roger, they're the ones that have figured out, how to not have to do the night shift, because they've put it in a certain way to get it burning. And so they've become very one with the ahi. But it's a very powerful symbol of our ahi ka, and it's no, I guess it's no coincidence that our hapu is te ahi waru, so we come from volcanoes. You can't get more ahi than all the ahi references that we have going on. But yeah, it's a very beautiful tohu of the continued reclamation and the story of the whenua. And when groups come in, we take them on a hikoi, and as they leave the whenua, they can all add something to the ahi to keep it burning, add their mauri, add their leaves. The kids all come up and continuously stoke the fire. Some of our cousins come up in the middle of the night and have their own little whanonga with the fire. So this fire, I think, has been quite a healer for lots of different people and for different reasons. It's been a place to bring people together, and it's been a nice wānanga space, with these seats around it now. When we finish those hikoi, we can come and sit around and share kōrero, and the tamariki can share their experiences. Even the pakeke that come through from all the different organisations can come and share whether they were here during the occupation and what they've seen since, or this is their first time, and so they get to share that. I remember a ropu coming through from America just earlier this summer, and I took them on a hikoi and had a kōrero about the whenua, and then we came back and we sat around the ahi and talked about the ahi. And part of that challenge, or part of that wero, after teaching them about our whenua, is to then go home and learn about your own whenua, and where do you live, and what does that mean for the Indigenous people who are around you? What does it mean for our cousins on Turtle Island? It's all good to come here and learn about our whenua, learn about the struggles of our people, learn about the resilience of Māori, and then connect with the kōrero and the whakaaro that comes with the concept of ahi ka. Or what does that actually mean when you go home? And whether home is another part of Aotearoa, or whether home is, Hawaii ki Pāmamao, somewhere far away. What are the lessons that you learned in Ihumātao that you need to take with you home? And what responsibility do you have as tauiwi on someone else's whenua to the whānau, to the ahi ka that are there? How are you supporting them to regrow their ngahere, to reclaim their whenua, to keep their ahi burning? All of those are really important kōrero to continue to have. Yeah.
Yeah, so our tino rangatiratanga sign just in the back here it was inspired by the Tent Embassy in Canberra and Te Whenua Moemoeā in Australia, and the work that they've been doing there for the past 20 years and more. And this sign also here serves as a reminder to our whānau and those who support our campaign to protect the whenua, that every day that we are here and in this kaupapa, rangatiratanga is one of the things that we are trying to pursue here on the whenua. It also connects us to upholding te tiriti o Waitangi and he whakaputanga, which which reaffirms tangata whenua's rights to exercise mana motuhake, self-determination, and their rangatiratanga, their authority for their whenua and their taonga and their those things that are very precious to them. And so that is also another reason why we have our tino rangatiratanga sign there. And I just every time that I see the sign, or used to wake up and glaze over there, it just gave me this overwhelming sense of pride, and just, I think too, was one way to keep our campaign group and those that were here to support the kaupapa in line with our campaign principles, and to also help maintain our peaceful, passive, positive resistance here in Ihumātao. So here you'll see one of our pauwhenua or our art installations. These are one of the many that we've seen over the years, and this was done by one of our friends, Jaden Flavel. We've had many different artists and many different people come here actually and contribute their skills, their knowledge to our kaupapa. And so what Jaden was able to bring was his knowledge and his skills around mahinga toi, around arts. And so these were donated by, again, the Wedding family, the local quarry, and they were painted, and we asked if he could do something beautiful with them to signify the entrance to Aotearoa Stonefields Historic Reserve, but also Puketapapa, which is the name that our whānau have given to this whenua here. And so what a pauwhenua symbolises is that there are people here, there's ahika here maintaining the whenua, who are connected to the whenua and who are here to ensure that they exercise Kaitiakitanga over the whenua. And for us it was about protecting it and telling the story. So on this side we have the ira tāne, and on that side we have the ira wahine, and those acknowledge the male and female essence that different campaigners and whānau bring to this campaign. This is one of the many projects that we've been working on as a whānau here on the whenua. So and for me this is one of our passion and pride projects. It's the puna restoration project. So there were many puna or springs that were laid across this whenua before the whenua was confiscated in 1863, and those puna were used by our tupuna to gather healing waters and wai to sustain them. And so through the farming that happened on this whenua, the majority of those puna were dried up or dammed to make way for agricultural farming. And so when we moved on to the whenua, and through our whānau engagement wānanga with our whānau, we identified a number of projects, priority projects that our whānau wanted to work on to restore the health of our whenua and the mauri of our whenua, and this was one of them. And so what we're doing here is supporting the regeneration of our puna wai. So maybe 2 years ago there wouldn't have been a puna as high as this one there, but as you can see there's wai flowing here, and over the last 2 years we've planted around 16,000 native rako across this puna and another puna on the other side of the road. Native rako that once were on this whenua before it was farmed. And so what we see with the puna restoration project is not only about reclaiming those puna that were destroyed through farming or lost through colonization and the confiscation of our whenua, but the puna is also a source of climate resilience. We know that Mangere was once a wetland area, and so this is part of the wider Mangere wetland project, and our wetlands are one of the best carbon sequences that we have here in Aotearoa. So all the carbon that's in the air has been captured by our wetlands and this puna here, and also the rako that are growing around the puna as well are carbon sequences. And so that's one of the ways that our whānau are working towards being climate resilience in our papakainga. Well, this here is Te Whare Aio. This used to be an old derelict milking shed that we've converted into a whare kohanga, a kai nursery. And so at its peak there was something like 1,600 seedlings growing in this milking shed over COVID, in which we shared with whānau who at that time were experiencing food insecurity issues or anxieties due to the difficulties around purchasing kai and being out in the public. But also too, whānau during that time were wanting to reconnect with the land and those sorts of things. And so we gave out all the kai seedlings to our whānau for free to help them pursue food sovereignty and to connect with our whenua and our kai. Some of the practices here at Te Whare Aio are drawn from the hua parakore principles and our mahinga kai stories and pūrako about our tupuna who once grew kai on this whenua to feed the growing population of Tāmaki Makaurau. And so some of our whānau aspirations is to reclaim those mara kai that once were located on this whenua, in particular the tāpapa in the tupuna gardens that once grew on this whenua. And so we've been working on that project for the last 2-3 years. So at the back here we have some taro, and we have a rongoa ngahere that's growing just in the back here. And we also were beekeeping before the storm happened in January, and that was another whānau social enterprise that we were pursuing at that time to help us as a whānau become more self-sustainable and to create a revenue to help support the activities that were happening on this whenua. So if I think back maybe 2-3 years ago, before my daughter was born, none of these harakeke were in sight. These mara of this area here would have been covered in cows, and there's a concrete driveway in here, but all the whānau's hard work have been able to transform this space into what it is today. Our whānau and our hapori are welcome to come down here and harvest kai. Lots of the kai too, when there's excess, is taken down to the marae for tangi or hui. And shared out amongst our whānau. One of the highlights of the Te Whare Aio project was harvesting kumara here for the first time 3 years ago in 156 years, since our whānau were somewhat alienated or weren't able to access this whenua. And so that was a real highlight for us. And
inspired us to continue with our mahinga kai projects. So I'm really excited in a few years that this area here will all be covered in native rako, and we'll also be growing our tupuna gardens here as well. We're also really lucky to be able to draw on inspiration from Te Pane o Mataoho gardens, and also those at Paurewa and Papatuanuku Kōkiri Marae. And for us it was important to make those hononga with our local marae and communities who are doing mahinga kai to share knowledge, to help us build capacity and capabilities in this space, and just to stay connected with those who are doing similar things. Yeah, so Papatuanuku Kōkiri Marae is one of those that inspired us in this mahi, and they're located here in Mangere, not far from here. Paurewa up at Orake, our Ngāti Whātua whānau there, have a beautiful maramataka garden and have a stellar plant nursery there. And also we've been inspired by the work of Parihaka, and I think that's the work of Parihaka early on in our campaign to protect our whenua inspired us to reclaim our mahinga kai practices, and it also was a way for us to maintain rongo, peace here on the whenua. Often we had people come here who were angry or upset, had a lot of trauma that they were facing, and so getting involved with the mara and being in the space of rongo matane allowed them to find peace and calm, and reminded them that we are people who mahinga kai. We aren't people who are pakanga, a war people. The people of our marae and of Tahika here are very much passive, peaceful people, and so and a lot of our pūraka and our histories really speaks to those characteristics and qualities of our whānau. And so we were really privileged to be able to draw on those learnings from Parihaka to maintain peace in our kaupapa here, and inspired us too, when we learned about the stories of the Parihaka whānau continuing to survey the land, farm the land, although the government were surveying it, kind of inspired us to continue to pursue justice for our whenua. So, yeah.